So good morning to everybody. Welcome to the SSAA Industry Week. So we've got an interesting day lined up for you. It's been a journey to get to here. So our concept of Industry Week didn't arrive in just a day. We started out back in 2016 at the Melbourne convention actually, and we had what we called an open day. And the idea behind that was so we could showcase the products and services that all of our suppliers can deliver to this industry. And it was aimed mostly at people that were perhaps new or thinking about getting into storage. But from there, we took the show onto the road and we were able to travel around different parts of Australia and New Zealand, introducing open days to our members and non-members alike. And then came COVID, which of course is probably a storyline that we're all very familiar with now, but we've had to change the way we do things. So with some quick planning, we've been able to turn our one-day event around into now a series of information-packed one-hour webinars that we're going to be running all this week. So what I'm going to be doing today and every other day this week is interviewing our various suppliers so that we can understand what it is to design and construct a storage facility, how we fit it out with security, how we actually operate the business. So whether you're in the market to expand, build, retrofit, improve your current facility, I think there's going to be something of interest in this for you. So we're going to start out with design and construction today, and we've got our guest panelists on board. You can see them and I'll introduce them in a moment. Tuesday, we're going to go further into construction, what we call construction extras. We're going to talk roller doors, lifts and hoists and refits. Wednesday, it's going to be software and security. And Thursday, store management and web design. And then Friday, we're going to wrap up with storage, the complete story. And then we're going to take you on a facility tour from the comfort of your office, your lounge room, your dining table, or wherever you might be holed up right now. So before I introduce our panelists today, I do have to make special mention the SSAA have a number of partners, VisiBoxes and more, Storco, Universal Storage Containers, Storm & Software, and Southwell Lifts and Hoists, along with PTI Security. They're our partners, and I now want to move on to actually introducing our speakers, our guest panelists today. We've got Jonathan Layton from Storco, one of our major partners. Jonathan, welcome. Where are you today, Jonathan?
I'm in sunny Orange today, Susan, and thanks for inviting me along. Central HQ for Storco, and over to Shay McQuaid from Universal Storage Containers. Shay, whereabouts are you hailing from today?
I'm in lockdown Melbourne.
Okay, you haven't got a mask on, that's good to see. I'm sure that wouldn't stop you from talking though.
No, true.
And of course, we've got Javier Rizadico from Storcad. Javier, whereabouts are you today?
I'm actually in my own home office in Hartley, New South Wales.
So is that what, between
Sydney? It's regional. It's sort of west of Sydney, about an hour west of Sydney. All right,
okay. So let's just do a little bit of housekeeping here. I want to remind everyone that our sessions are going to be recorded, so that if you miss something today, and of course you can't hear me now if you're not logged in, but you can come back to these sessions because they're being recorded and they'll be released probably by next week. They'll all be available for download. Now, as we work through our interview with our panelists today, you might have some questions you'd like to ask. Can you go to the Q&A box? Now, you'll find that right down the bottom of your screen. If you jump into that and add any questions, and I'll endeavour to be able to pose those to our panelists as we go along. And then we will also be playing some videos today, so to introduce our guest businesses, so Storco, USC and Storcad. So if you're having some connectivity problems, you might want to think about hotspotting to your phone. That's always just one of those things, unfortunately, with people working from various locations, not necessarily always in their office. So to set the scene for today,
I do want to move on to something that the SSAA have put together, and it's our storage of story. And Brian's going to play a short video for us now. So Brian, would you hit the play button, please?
The Self-Storage Association of Australasia, or SSAA for short, is the only industry organisation representing self-storage owners, operators and service providers across Australia and New Zealand. A study commissioned by the SSAA in 2020 determined that there are some 2,020 storage facilities across Australia and New Zealand, with a combined net storage area of 5.8 million square metres. The average facility occupancy rate by area is 83%. So what is self-storage? In simple terms, it's the letting of space to a customer. The self-storage facility does not take control or custody of any of the stored goods. In other words, the customer stores their own goods, locks their unit and keeps the keys. There are various types of self-storage facilities: purpose-designed and built storage facilities, converted warehouses or large buildings, single-level drive-up facilities, multi-level facilities, storage containers such as sea containers and purpose-built containers, mobile storage, where a storage container is delivered to the customer to be packed and then returned to the facility and stored, outdoor storage for caravans, boats and trucks, wine storage and gun storage. There are varying operating models and ownership structures too. Operators include the national multi-location companies like Kennards, National Storage, Storage King and National Mini Storage, to the more traditional owner-manager at a single location. There are also real estate managed facilities. This is where storage unit bookings are facilitated through a real estate agent on behalf of the owners. This, however, is a very small proportion of operators. Then there are management companies who specialise in managing the operations of self-storage facilities on behalf of the owner. A typical storage operation would include the following: storage fees being paid in advance, usually monthly. Storage fees will vary depending on the size of the unit. Units can generally range from 1 metre by 1 metre lockers up to 3 metre by 8 metre, with many other sizes in between. Price depends on the size and market expectations. Storage agreements or contracts are an essential part of business. A storage agreement is very different to commercial real estate or tenancy agreements. In the industry, there are typically 4 key drivers for demand. These are known as the 4 Ds: density, such as population growth and living density, divorce, death, and displacement. So what do customers usually store? There's household items and furniture, items of sentimental value, seasonal items, business stock, documents, cars, motorbikes, boats, guns, and wine. Income is derived in several ways. The obvious one is storage fee rental, but facilities can levy charges for cleaning fees, late fees, box shop sales, padlocks, and insurance cover. Storage facilities can also derive income by other methods. For example, managing storage on behalf of a customer by taking delivery of items to be stored and managing the customer's space. This is a service that business customers may require. Serviced offices or meeting spaces, billboard advertising on your spare land, telecommunications towers, and the hire of moving vehicles and trailers. The Self-Storage Association has a range of service providers who are also members. Their expertise ranges from design and construction, security, storage management software, website design, mobile storage containers, lifts and hoists, roller doors, quality padlocks, storage facility management, and storage facility valuations. If you are new, then welcome to the storage journey. If you're an established operator looking to expand or improve services at your facility, you've come to the right place. This is our story of storage. What will yours be?
Thank you and welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed our little showcase of some of our members from around Australia and New Zealand. So this really interesting week, the journey is going to start with us now and with our first panel. And I want to go through and introduce those again. So Jonathan, let's start with Storco, and I'd like to do an introduction to Storco. So Brian, could you do that for us, please?
Hello and welcome to the first ever Self-Storage Association Virtual Industry Week. My name is Jonathan Layton from Storco Storage Systems. We manufacture and install world-class partition systems and building systems throughout Australia and New Zealand. We've been operating for over 40 years. I hope you enjoy this brief tour of our production facility.
Thanks, Jonathan. I recall being at your factory in Orange. I think it was 2 years ago when we had an open day in Orange, and that was part of our, we did a facility tour and we also visited your factory. It was an inspiring place to visit, and I thoroughly enjoyed it along with all of the other guys that day. So thanks for sharing once again. It seems as though, has Shay dropped out? I can't see him anywhere. Perhaps Brian might give him a call for us. In the meantime, we'll move on to Javier, and I'd like to take a closer look at and introduce Storcad and what that business can do for you if you're wanting to design a facility. So we might hear from Storcad now, please. Thank you, Harvey. I'm looking forward to hearing more exactly what it is that you do when people come knocking on your door. Now, I think Shay is there. So let's try, no, but we'll move on and we'll show you what Shay and USC or Universal Storage Containers, what their business is all about while we check on connectivity with Shay. But Brian, if you could play the USC introductory, please.
Back on. Seems to be back on now.
welcome back to everybody. And thanks for that look into your businesses. I think that helps set the scene for today. I'm just hoping that we saw some of those videos on, fast forward, if you like. And I know that life seems to be going very fast at the moment. So I think we need to slow it down now and ask some questions, and let's walk it through so that we can start to understand what it is about this storage business that so many people are curious about. Some people are wanting to know more, and that's the idea behind today, so that we can introduce people that may not know a lot about storage. We can share with them, but also lots and lots of our members who are at various stages in their own businesses, and we want to perhaps give them some ideas on improvements and changes that they may wish to make. Maybe they want to expand, maybe they want to build a new facility entirely. So let's start out, because we do have to design a facility really well, and that's where Javier comes in to help. So Javier, I'm going to throw the first question to you. So what types of storage are available, and how can these be incorporated into the designs that you do?
There's quite a few types of storage that are available out there. Look, typically the most common one is still the same sort of cookie cutter self-storage facility that people tend to build. But there's a lot of sites that you could actually go and see that area is calling for a different type of storage that you could also incorporate into that same facility. Things like caravan and RV and boat storage, things like gun and ammunition storage, or temperature controlled wine storage. There's quite a number of different types. Things like USC, the relocatable storage. There's some sites that you typically have issues with, not being able to get a council approval to construct anything on that site. So possibly some relocatable storage units might be the better way to go. Look, you really need to have a look at what your particular site is calling for, doing some market research and seeing what type, if you're going to incorporate this, a few of these different types of storage facilities into that site, that area is particularly calling for it to be successful.
So it's sounding like, to me, design is essential. It's not just a block of land and, excuse the crude term, whack up a bunch of sheds, because often people have always referred to storage as that, which it is not. It's quite sophisticated. So, and looking into that design right from the beginning is where hopefully people then won't make mistakes that they have to live with for a very long time, because they've built the wrong thing on the wrong site. So what's the first steps to designing then and to getting it right?
Look, typically there's quite a bit that needs to go into your first steps in your self-storage design. There's, again, what your area is calling for. So have you done some market research into knowing how much actual GFA is required in that area? You might have a site that's big enough that can take 12,000 square meters of GFA or storage, but will you ever fill it? Doing some market research and finding out what the area is calling for, how much competition you've got in the area, choosing what type of storage you're going to have there as well. But then that's making a decision of the type of the storage that you're going to put on that site, but then what can you actually build on that site you need to look at as well. So things like, what are your council restrictions? Do you have height restrictions? Do you have, what are your setbacks on that site? Do you have an actual FSR restriction? So your floor space ratio, are you allowed to have a certain amount of storage on that site? And they're all big ones. So they're all, if you're looking to actually purchase a site, you need to be looking at that before you actually make that commitment. You don't want to commit to a site, purchasing a site, and then finding out later that you're only allowed to build on 50% of it, or things like that. You need to definitely look into, is that site going to call for what that area needs? And if you're restricted by some form of FSR or height, then you may not particularly get what you require. But then there's also things like if you've got an existing site. So do you have all the information that you need from that particular site? So what are the structural capabilities of that building that you've got? there's quite a number of things you need to look at before you even start that design.
Yes, and local government's always a great place to start because they're always full of surprises when it comes to development applications, aren't they? So, Jonathan, I'm going to switch to you now. So, what information does an initial concept provide you with? So,
I suppose the key point of an initial concept is to work out some basic build costs and also look at some of the revenues that site can bring you. I think one thing we could never get away from, and especially anybody who's involved in this industry and has been for years, will recognise the fact that it's really essential at that initial concept stage to maximise the return on investment. That's what self-storage is all about. So how can we minimise the build cost and how can we maximise the return? So that is through optimised unit mix, optimised net lettable area, choosing the types of storage that we've already discussed on, whether we're going to incorporate a little bit of gun storage or wine storage, boat and RV storage. But really the initial concept is where the whole development really springs from. And the importance of that really is to, rather than go out to a full-blown design up front, which can cost you tens of thousands of dollars, it's a starting point for you to start doing some research, go along to the council and maybe have a pre-lodgement meeting with the council and discuss your design so you don't fall into some of those traps that Javier just mentioned, like your floor space ratio, maybe your setbacks, building height restrictions, car parking restrictions. I think it's a really key part to the success of any new self-storage development to start with a basic initial concept from somebody who really does understand the industry, because a facility may work well with just hundreds of 6x3s across the site and it gets built and it works really well. But there could have been another way to develop that site which would have given you a much better return on investment.
And look, I think that when people are designing it, especially when they can have the luxury of building it in stages, I think they always find that come time for stage 2, they realise that the initial design doesn't actually fit the model that the business is working on. But that's a hard call at the beginning. But Shay, I'm going to flip to you now because I'm thinking that councils do have a lot to say when it comes to development applications and where you can build and what you can put down. And some areas are temporary or they can't build something solid on it at all. So what's the pros and cons of having units, drop-down units in a storage facility?
Okay, just go back to what the other two boys said about the overall design and the planning. I mean, one of the pros, I suppose, of the drop-down boxes, as we call them, is that somebody can actually, let's say, who's new to storage or potentially getting into storage, may well have a site, will know that the planning process and the concept design process for a fully fledged, mini storage king or whatever is going to take some time. There's nothing to stop these guys to then potentially putting a small number of drop-down units in, having spoken to their council about any restrictions on the site, to get started in the storage game. I'm not going to be offended if they come along in 2 years and decide that they're going to then build a facility by Jonathan. That's fine. But it gives them a toe on the water, and it also means that they get a better handle on their market. So when it comes to then determining with the Jonathans of the world what their unit size mix should be, they're in a better position than just starting from scratch.
Okay, all right. So we saw your video before. It is quite intriguing watching it in fast forward and those units that are coming out of a sea container. I think there's 6 of them in a sea container. Are they flat packed, is what you call it? Yeah. Yeah,
they're flat packed and they're actually 12. You saw them pull out 6 there. There's another 6 in there that you didn't see. But we get 12. I'll use feet and inches. We get 12 20-foot units into each 40-foot container.
Oh, okay. All right. So when they're erected, how high can they be stacked in?
Well, we have 2 specifications. So if you can stack them empty 2 high quite easily. If you want to stack them 3 high fully when they're full, while they look the same, there's a different specification which obviously takes into account the weight of the 2 units on top and the stuff in there. But ordinarily we see particularly mobile storage boxes being stacked 3 high.
So we talked about they're delivered in sea containers, but how are they installed? What's the, well,
it's an assembly process as much as an installation process. You saw them come out of the 40-foot container, and you saw them at that's real time, by the way. Those guys run around doing that assembly at that rate. Realistically, it takes about an hour to build the first one. This is for people who haven't built one before, and by the end of the day, and you can get 12 done in a day, but towards the end of the day, you're running at about half an hour, 35 minutes per unit. You need a forklift and 3 guys to do it efficiently. But it's basically all of the walls are already pre-hinged to the base, so it's just a question of popping up the walls and then with the forklift dropping the roof on top. Obviously, these are all then bolted down, and then they can be forklifted into position. So the video actually gives a pretty good rundown on how they are assembled.
It sure did. So we've been looking at the design from the beginning, and obviously there's a number of ways to do things, but of course the question on all of our lips is this year 2020 has been one like no other, and I guess that's had an impact on all of you and the way you've been able to not just conduct your own business, but what it's meant for your clients. So Jonathan, I'm going to pose this one to you. What sort of an effect has the pandemic had with self-storage facilities and the design now, and perhaps what's going to come our way in the future?
It's an interesting question, Susan, and we're probably a little bit early through the phase to have a really good understanding of that yet. What I will say is that I think self-storage has proved once again to be very much a resilient industry, regardless of whether there's ups or downs. It seems to plough on, for want of a better word. And we've seen that. And I think what we are seeing is a renewed confidence in that industry, which means that I think some of the drawings and projects that are coming across our desk, if anything, are probably a bigger emphasis on a very smart design in terms of aesthetics. So looking more and more like a high-end commercial type development rather than the old tin shed. I think what we are seeing even on existing sites now is that businesses that in the past have gone and taken out a 5 or a 10-year lease on small factory units or even larger factories or warehousing situations have got nervous about signing themselves up to long leases and are finding ways of operating their business out of self-storage facilities on a month-by-month basis. And I think we've definitely heard of upticks from our clients on more of that type of business customer. And I think what will happen is, where we're starting to see it come through, is more inclusions of small offices and say a common boardroom. So if you rent a storage unit for a period of time, you get access to a couple of hours a month in the boardroom or something like that. So people can actually run small businesses more effectively out of self-storage. I think it's really part of the whole diversification process within the industry, and almost another product that's sort of been around for a few years but has never really taken off. Javier might have some comments on that too. He's seen quite a few designs across his desk.
Well, I noticed that in his introduction that you're obviously designing these mixed use, I suppose you'd call them, Javier.
Yeah, look, it's really the mixed use sites are really come down to when people don't have much option in the terms of closer to CBD and things like that, where you've got a site that is probably oversized for what you need, but just for storage. And obviously, incorporating something like bulky goods or cafes or restaurants or something on that actual site as well is definitely got to be utilised to make that site work for you. But look, I agree with Jonathan that we haven't seen the change as yet. The confidence is definitely there. We've been playing with it along, like Jonathan's saying, it's been really strong market for self-storage, even though the COVID has hit. But the designs and the changes that we're making now won't be seen for another 12 months. Things like contactless move-ins, the type of, I think a lot more based around the security of the site as to how people access these sites. I think that's going to change dramatically as well. Smart design is going to be, more user-friendly sites is going to be the key. Probably sacrificing a little bit of NLA for a more user-friendly site has been seen a little bit more recently as well. So I think we need to look out for those type of things coming up in the next 12 months.
So, Jonathan, there is a question in our Q&A that's directed to you. It's from Michelle Johns from Cat Self Storage in Perth. So she wants to know, has COVID-19 impacted construction material availability?
Yes and no. Depends where the product that you're working with comes from. Our supply, as you've seen with our video, we're Australian made, and we've got a very strong Australian supply chain. So personally, Storco, or as an organisation, we haven't had any issues around supply of materials. I know there's been some port issues for some people with imported product, where particularly with even the Wharfies strike, which is actually not exactly COVID related, has delayed some projects. By and large, it hasn't slowed the projects from a material perspective. Where it has probably caused some challenges for the national builders is just the movement of install crews. We all utilise crews from various states for our install. And with the borders shut, we can't just move people around. Particularly Tasmania is difficult because we don't have any crews based in Tasmania. So we're shipping from the mainland, sending people from the mainland who haven't been able to get in. So there's been some quite long delays on projects there. All the other states do have installers, and New Zealand, we've got a number of crews over there. But it just means we haven't got the flexibility that we did have in the past to move crews around depending on where the bulk of the workload was. So from a material perspective, no. But overall, there has been some delays. Particularly where else there's been some delays, a lot of councils have been working from home. So the approval process has taken a lot longer than it typically would. People saying, oh, hang on, so-and-so's got to sign off on this, but I haven't had a chance to scan it and send it to them. And it has added weeks to some of the approval processes.
I hadn't thought that would be the case, but you're right, it would be that issue in every state and territory, and in New Zealand it's going to be different. So yeah, it would not be an easy job. Shay, I'm going to flip over to you now. So perhaps what factors are actually driving mobile storage, and do you think some of that is COVID related? And maybe you don't have to answer it that way at all. Maybe you can just talk about mobile storage and what you can do.
Oh, thanks, Susan. Just to add to Jonathan's comment about the any delays that are COVID related, our units are actually manufactured in a plant in China, and we've had probably about a week to 2 week shipping delay over the last couple of months, but that's been the only impact. So just a slight, instead of 8 to 10 weeks, it might be 10 to 12 weeks. In the case of mobile storage and the trends towards mobile, our cities are becoming more and more dense, and we've got more and more people living in smaller spaces. I think the population is supposed to get to 38 million within 20 years, but most of that growth will be in cities. A lot of apartment developments, and we're finding that some of those apartment dwellers in a city, they may or may not have access to a great big truck or trailer. So we're seeing a lot of growth where they're moving from smaller spaces to other smaller spaces. And that sometimes works well with the mobile operators. I won't name names, but one in particular has got a small format box, which seems to work particularly well in the inner cities, inner city areas, Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne. But there's certainly a growth in that area. The other interesting thing that's growing is traditionally people would fill up a mobile storage box and would go back to a warehouse for storage for 6 months, 12 months, whatever. But we've seen a movement to people actually getting a mobile storage unit, leaving it in their driveway for a month or 2 months while they're doing some renovations, for example. So they're using it as storage on their own site. And that's driven a change in, I suppose, in the construction materials that will work for those type of boxes. I mean, the mobile storage game has traditionally been a wooden crate format, but that's now moving more and more to a more, I suppose, weatherproof, longer standing or longer lasting product that can sit out in the weather or be stacked internally.
Okay. All right. Let's switch to, and we were discussing development applications and approvals before, Javier, and I think that's probably a favourite topic that everyone has to go through at some time. Favourite is quite painful at times, or other times I suppose people can have an easy run at it. But is a development approval the only way to get the green light to build your facility? $1 million question.
Look, short answer, yes. Long answer, no. There's some. There are some sites that do have some leniency. In particular, I've had some recent success with sites that have a pre-existing warehouse. Being able to do a retrofit type development on that site would still sometimes entail a development application if you're going to add GFA to that site, i.e. putting another mezzanine floor within that building. But look, there have been some workarounds lately that we've been able still to be able to get that type of approval through a complying development. So I've had some success in adding about 1,600 square metres to a site of GFA via a mezzanine floor as a compliant development certificate rather than doing as a development application. So that basically just means we get all the boxes ticked structurally. All of your fire stuff gets ticked off by a certifier, and it basically bypasses having to go to council. It just gets everything approved for a private certifier, and that allows you to construct a lot sooner. It saves you a lot of costs in doing your development application, then also doing a construction certificate. Whereas this process will save you time and money as well, but it's not applicable to every site. So you do have to do your research first to see if that could work. But look, the long answer is probably the most preferred one by people because you don't have to deal with council. But probably 80% of the time you still do.
Mm-hmm. So now that you've opened up that can of worms on development applications, there's a question that's coming from one of our audience members, and it says, what are the typical costs involved with a development application?
Yeah, look, it really depends again on how big and what type of development you're going for. So obviously, if it's a greenfield site that you're working with, you're going to have obviously your concept plans, your full development application plans. You're going to have initial consultants that are going to be required. So people that will organise your fire issues, things like landscaping. There's quite a number of people involved that would have to get that approval through. But what I typically tend to do is have a pre-lodgement meeting with council and get a bit of a checklist together as to what's required for that development application. And recent times with the whole COVID thing, I'm pretty impatient and typically go to council face to face and have these meetings with them and get the information out of them quickly. Whereas recently they don't allow that because of the whole COVID. So it's an online pre-lodgement meeting that you would have with them. And it does, like Jonathan said earlier, it does actually slow down the whole approval process.
Yeah, I guess that was something that was going to come our way in this current climate. So this is a question that's come from someone else now, and it's about zoning and what's required for a self-storage facility. And in fact, I really need a good answer here because I had a member contact us last week talking about zoning on a new site that they're looking at. So fill me in because I need to know the answer as well.
Yeah, again, self-storage is a tricky one because it doesn't have its own classification that would fall under anything. So you could also, things that have popped up through council in the past, they would send back a response saying we find it as general storage facility. So that would fall under, say, your general industries, any sort of type of industrial area. But one thing that I've found in the past is that even though you've got the correct zoning, industrial type zoning, even if you back onto something that's residential or very close to residential, there are still some pretty major impacts that could have on your design, even if you do have the correct zoning. When you actually go and get your development application sent out to all of your neighbours to see if they're going to be approving this, you could get some kickback from some people saying that that's too high, it's going to cause too much shadow over my property. There's things like that. So even if you do have the correct zoning, which is generally general industrial type zoning, you could still have some kickback if you are close to residential.
And look, it comes down to that education piece with people in local government that you still struggle with. They don't understand storage necessarily. In my query the query from the member last week was around local government telling him, oh, well, that's a warehouse. No, you can't have a warehouse there. I mean, it's clearly nothing like a warehouse, in our opinion. Shay, I'm going to flick over to you now. So do facilities have to have applications to council if they're wanting to put drop-down boxes or storage containers on their sites?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And there's no one answer, because what we found is that each of the councils treat these things differently. Mm-hmm. In theory, because they're 2.4 meters high, that certainly gives the let's call it the storage developer a lot more leniency. Because they're transportable, there's a lot more leniency in terms of sitting on easements or on the power lines or whatever. But every council treats it differently. So there is no hard and fast plan for drop-down storage units. My advice to people is to go and have an informal chat with the council first, and just to see what the lie of the land is. I've seen completely different outcomes from seemingly similar situations.
Yeah. Okay. So let's think about the facility. And now I'm got this other question that's come through, and this is one that is interesting from the point of view of a facility that possibly is being designed and built, or maybe retrofitting. But and Jonathan, Javier, sprinklers in storage facilities. Who would like to have a shot at that answer?
I'll have a crack at the first part, and then Javier can have a go too. But we are definitely finding a bigger trend towards sprinklers. Mm-hmm. I think in the past it's been pretty much what's the bare minimum we can get away with in terms of fire services. We just want to put the bare minimum in to just get approval. But after seeing a couple of high-profile fires go through these facilities, the idea that we have fire compartments and just let that whole compartment burn down, everyone get out, isn't quite as straightforward as it might seem on paper, particularly when most of the firewalls in these facilities are only built to withstand 90 minutes or an hour and a half, whereas these fires can burn for days. So those fire compartment walls can easily come down and continue to consume the whole site. And there's a whole lot of, obviously, a whole range of issues that come out of that. So I think there's been a change to say, let's put more sprinklers in and have the fire put out in a localised area of damage rather than the potential to lose a whole site. But the code hasn't changed yet to insist on it any more than it was a couple of years ago. But there's definitely a trend within the industry to heading down that path. But Javier might have some more to add to that.
Yeah, you're right, Jonathan. It's any sort of BCA requirements haven't changed recently, but what I have seen a lot more of is the actual brigade getting involved in these applications. Generally there is a criteria that you have that if you meet the entire criteria within your development application, it doesn't allow the brigade to actually get involved in that design. But obviously, if you step over the mark on any of one of those criteria, you generally do have to get them involved and get their feedback. And even if your site does actually comply with the BCA, you generally still have to go with what the brigade is trying to enforce as well, because if you don't, then it becomes almost a nightmare to try and get insurance for your site once it's been built. But I find Jonathan's right, that the actual developer of these sites, whoever's the owner of these sites and actually constructing, have had a little bit more input and wanting to actually put sprinklers in their site just to safeguard their investment a lot more recently, although it's adding a lot more cost to the site and a lot more time in construction when you're retrofitting these things into these sites. That the consensus out there is, we want to have a safe site for anybody that's going to be using it.
Okay. That's interesting what you bring up there, Javier, in relation to the fire brigades, because as soon as they get involved, that could comfortably turn into a 6 to 12 month saga to get an answer out of that. And you've got to put some sort of dollar value on lack of income for that whole period. Whereas if you went for a safer solution that didn't end up going to the brigade, you may get it through and be out of the ground and finished a lot earlier, months and months earlier.
So BCA refers to Building Code of Australia. So then if a law was to change, that would change right across the country. Is that what you're indicating there?
It's basically,
wouldn't be state by state.
Yeah, basically it's through the NCC now, the National Construction Code. That's correct. It's but in the states, it's still the fire codes. There is some state component to it as well.
Okay. Well, what's it like across in New Zealand? Do they come under something similar as to Australia? I don't know, Jonathan, you build over in New Zealand as well, and I think we've got Jerry Garton online as well, so he might have to jump in there and type an answer for us if we don't know. But what's it like there for those requirements?
The fire code is a lot more onerous and a lot more complex in New Zealand than it is in Australia. For example, we can do 2-level buildings comfortably with a lightweight floor, no fire rating to the floor, and through engineered solutions, often even a 3-level building. Over there, every mezzanine floor needs to be fire rated. And there's definitely a much greater tendency towards sprinklers as well. So the codes are a lot more stringent. Your fire costs on a New Zealand build project are significantly higher as a percentage than they would be in Australia.
Okay. And Jerry, bless his heart, I'm glad he's online. This is Jerry Garton from A-Line Construction. So I think most of you are familiar with Jerry. He's just posted a comment saying new changes are coming for the fire code later this year. And he's agreeing with you, Jonathan, that it's much more onerous in New Zealand. And
the interesting thing is not just more onerous, it's a lot more complex. For example, in Australia, if your building's within 3 metres of the boundary, it's got to be fire rated for 90 minutes. If it's more than 3 metres, there's no fire rating. It's as simple as that.
Oh.
Over there, every fire report is different, and there's different amounts of fire rating depending on how far off the boundary you are. But typically a single level development with a 6.5 metre wide driveway, which is absolutely fine in Australia, still means certain percentages of a wall need to be fire rated. I've seen a facility over there where the operator went in and put a 300 mil strip of fire rating in each unit, and that got compliance because he had to have X percentage of the wall fire rated. Didn't matter where on the wall, as long as a percentage of the wall was fire rated.
And now that we're talking about New Zealand, when you're designing and constructing over there, it must be quite different because they've also got the issues with earthquakes as well, which we don't have. Well, we have earthquakes in Australia, but it depends on where you are, and they're probably perhaps not as savage.
That's correct. On a single level building, it doesn't make a lot of difference because your weight is not in the air. What affects earthquake design is weight in the air. So as soon as you put a mezzanine floor, bigger members and a lot more bracing to support that load in the event that it's thrown around in an earthquake. So overall, yes, your build costs, the two biggest factors that drive a lot higher build cost in New Zealand as compared to Australia is increased fire and earthquake, particularly on multi-level buildings.
Okay. And Jerry's just chimed in again, backing up the idea that if you're building in New Zealand, having a verified fire engineer probably would certainly sort out things in the design phase.
I would say on that yeah, definitely a real key part to a very early stage of your design in New Zealand is getting a fire engineer involved. And I will say, just working with A-Line and Jerry, they've been a great team to work with in New Zealand, and they've got some really good experienced consultants if anyone is looking to build over there.
Thinking about earthquakes in New Zealand, Shay, I've noticed when I've been travelling around and visiting members, and it's obvious that there's quite a lot of mobile storage in New Zealand, or container storage as well. Is some of that because of earthquake areas, or is that just that they just do things differently?
Yeah, look, I think to be honest, I think the engineering requirements of a slab in New Zealand post the Christchurch earthquake have changed considerably. So the cost of putting, particularly at a smaller end, I mean, if you're putting a small to medium sized facility, the slab cost and the slab engineering cost is huge. Whereas somebody might decide, well, I could put 50 or 100 of Shay's storage units in there without a slab, because ours do not have to have a full concrete slab. So I don't know that it's about the earthquake per se, but probably more to do with the cost of slab construction post earthquake. But again, that wouldn't apply if somebody's building a multi-million-dollar facility. It's not the end of the world. But if you're doing, let's say, 100 units, that slab cost could be a significant part of your overall spend.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's get away from disasters because we're coming into summer season, so they'll be here on us before we know it. But just looking at some of the other questions that we've got here, is there any particular, this is to you, Jonathan, any other particular states or regions with more construction activity than others at the moment? We see things across the country.
New Zealand is going well. We've got, it's pretty broad actually. We've got good work in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Tasmania. I think Perth has been flat for a long time, Western Australia, but I definitely think there seems to be a bit of a resurgence and a coming back of the market in Perth. But yeah, like this, it's probably across Australia and New Zealand at the moment, Perth's probably the flattest. Adelaide maybe somewhat. But the eastern seaboard and New Zealand there seems to be a lot of confidence. The general trend is that units are filling up probably a little bit faster than what the expectations have been on new sites.
Okay. Look,
Susan, mind if I chip in on that one? I think the Perth story is an interesting one. It's fun purely and simply down to supply and demand. The Perth market was undersupplied probably up to about 4 years ago, and a whole raft of people then made significant investment in capacity all at the same time. It's all come on stream at the same time, just as their economy took a turn in the other direction. So it's a classic supply-demand imbalance, which will just take time to resolve.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good, Shay. Good point.
Look, we're fast running out of time. So a couple of things now. If we've got any more questions, please feed them through, that we'll be happy to answer them offline, and each of our panelists will be available to do that. To the people that who are our members, we'd like to remind you of all of the benefits of being a member of our association. But to the people, excuse me, who aren't members of our association, we just very quickly like to remind you of what we can do as an association for you. So, Brian, if you could just do our short member benefits video for us, please.
Are you ready to get ahead in the storage industry? The Self-Storage Association of Australasia membership has its perks. Membership connects you with peers in the self-storage community, along with providing access to a wide range of high-quality benefits and services. The SSAA helps improve your business and build credibility, which in turn makes your business shine in today's competitive market. Visit selfstorage.org.au for more information.
So definitely get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. But if you've got any more questions for our panellists today, I'd like them, if it's okay with you guys, to provide your mobile numbers to everyone. If you everyone got a pen and paper handy, Jonathan, could you provide your contact details, please?
Yep, my mobile number is 0429 836 510, and my email is Jonathan, JONATHAN .Layton, LAYTON @Storco, STORCO.com.au, and glad to take any questions or discussions offline.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Shane, your contact number?
Yeah, number is 0438 256 541. Unfortunately, the email address is very long. It's shay.mcquaid@universalstoragecontainers, that's plural.com.
Okay. And Javier?
Yeah, you can get me on my mobile on 0447 566 988, or my email address is Javier, it's JAVIER @Storcad, STORCAD.com.au.
And if you don't remember any of that, just drop us a line at the SSAA, and we'd be more than happy to lend a hand and distribute those contacts for you as well. So thank you very much. I want to thank you, Jonathan, for today, Jonathan Layton, Shane McQuaid, and Javier Rezaninko, for our design and construction Q&A panel, and look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow, 11:30 a.m. That's Australian Eastern Daylight Time. We're on daylight saving, where we delve into the world of construction extras. We're only just starting to commence our journey into the world of storage. We've got that design organised now. Let's look more about how we actually build more of the building tomorrow with some of these guys, and fitting it out with roller doors and lifts and hoists and so forth. So look forward to tomorrow. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
See you later.
Thank you.